Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Kala Chanji Radha Kala Chanji Radhe Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadra Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Good morning, devotees. My name is Manjari Gopika Devi Dasi, And today we will be hearing from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 18, verses 40 through 45, and then we'll focus on verse 40. Before we begin, I ask for your blessings that I may speak something pleasing to my spiritual master, to Srila Prabhupada, and to all of you devotees. Let's begin by chanting together the invocation prayers. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narotamam devim sarvasvatim vyasyam tato jayamudirayet nashtaprayesha badreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati uttamashloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. Om Gyana Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gora Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. All right, so yes, we'll be reading the translations of 40 through 45, then we'll come back to verse 40. Before we begin, I feel like I should give a real quick brief summary for anybody who has missed the previous couple of classes, because we are in the midst of an episode here. It has not yet concluded. King Yayati became the ruler after his father Nahusha was cursed. King Yayati married Devayani, who is the daughter of Shukracharya, and he takes Sarmishta into his household after this dramatic quarrel between the two women. And Shukracharya allows this marriage, but warns Yayati not to approach Sharmista intimately. But later, Sharmista begs Yayati for a son, and he gives in. When his other wife, Devyani, discovers this, she runs to her father and complains. And Shukracharya is furious that because Yayati broke his promise, so he curses Yayati to become old and invalid. And Yayati pleads with him not to do this, and Shukracharya grants one concession, that he may exchange his old age with the youth of any of his sons. So Yayati then approaches his eldest son, Yadu, and that is where our verses today begin. Go ahead.
Yadu replied, "My dear father, you have already achieved old age, although you also were a young man. But I do not welcome your old age and infidelity, for unless one enjoys material happiness, one cannot attain renunciation."
And we'll come back to this purport. We're going to read all of the English right now, 40 through 45. Yes, text 41.
O Maharaj Parikshit, Yayati similarly requested his sons Turvasu, Drahyu and Anu to exchange their youth for his old age. But because they were unaware of the religious principles, they thought that their flickering youth was eternal, and therefore they refused to carry out their father's order.
King Yayati then requested Puru, who was younger than these three brothers but more qualified, "My dear son, do not be disobedient like your elder brothers, for that is not your duty."
Puru replied, "O your majesty, who in this world can repay his debt to his father? By the mercy of one's father, one gets the human form of life which can enable one to become an associate of the Supreme Lord."
A son who acts by anticipating what his father wants him to do is first class. One who acts upon receiving his father's order is second class, and one who executes his father's order irreverently is third class. But a son who refuses his father's order is like his father's stool.
Shukadev Goswami said, "In this way, O Maharaj Parikshit, the son named Puru was very pleased to accept the old age of his father Yayati, who took the youth of his son and enjoyed this material world as he required."
Thank you. We'll return to our focus verse today, which is text 40. We'll do the Sanskrit. Thank you for your help, Tulsi Saki. Shri Adur Uvacha Notsehe Jarasat Statam Antara Praptayatava Aviditva Sukham Gramyam Vaitrisnyam Naiti Purusha. Please chant. Shri Adur Uvacha Notsahe Jarasastatam Antara Praptayatava Aviditva Sukham Gramyam Vaitrishyam Naiti Purusha. Shri Aduruvacha Notsahe Jarasastatam Antara Praptayatava Avititva Sukham Gramyam Vaitrishyam Naiti Purusha. Shri Aduruvacha Notsahe Jarasastatum Antara Praptayatava Aviditva Sukham Gramyam Vaitrishyam Naiti Purusha. Thank you. Let's move on to the synonyms. Because we have them here in front of us, we can do them all together. Shri Adu Uvacha. Yadu, the eldest son to Yayati, replied, Na utsahe. I am not enthusiastic. Jarasa, with your old age and invalidity. Statum, to remain. Antara, while in youth. Praptaya, accepted. Tava, your. Aviditva, without experiencing. Sukham, happiness. Gramyam, material or bodily. Vaitrisnyam, indifference to material enjoyment. Na, does not. Ati, attain. Purusaha, a person. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Yadu replied, My dear father, You have already achieved old age, although you also were a young man. But I do not welcome your old age and invalidity, for unless one enjoys material happiness, one cannot attain renunciation. Purport. Renunciation of material enjoyment is the ultimate goal of human life. Therefore, the Varnashram institution is most scientific. It aims at giving one the facility to return home, back to Godhead, which one cannot do without completely renouncing all connections with the material world. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Nishkinchanasya Bhagavad Bhajanomukasya. One who wants to go back home, back to Godhead, must be Nishkinchana, free from all affinity for material enjoyment. Brahmani Upashamashrayam. Unless one is fully renounced, one cannot engage in devotional service or stay in Brahman. Devotional service is rendered on the Brahman platform. Therefore, unless one attains the Brahman platform, or spiritual platform, one cannot engage in devotional service. Or, in other words, a person engaged in devotional service is already on the Brahman platform. Mamchayo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kopate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. Bhagavad Gita 14.26. If one attains devotional service, therefore, he is certainly liberated. Generally, unless one enjoys material happiness, one cannot attain renunciation. Varnashram, therefore, gives the opportunity for gradual elevation. Yadu, the son of Maharaj Yayati, explained that he was unable to give up his youth, for he wanted to use it to attain the renounced order in the future. Maharaj Yadu was different from his brothers. As stated in the next verse, Turvasush Chodita Pitra Juyush Chanushcha Bharat Pratya Chakur Adharma Gyana. Maharaj Yadu's brothers refused to accept their father's proposal because they were not completely aware of Dharma. To accept orders that follow religious principles, especially the orders of one's father, is very important. Therefore, when the brothers of Maharaj Yadu refused their father's order, this was certainly irreligious. Maharaj Yadu's refusal, however, was religious. As stated in the 10th canto, Yadoscha Dharma Shilasya, Maharaj Yadu was completely aware of the principles of religion. The ultimate principle of religion is to engage oneself in devotional service to the Lord. Maharaj Yadu was very eager to engage himself in the Lord's service, but there was an impediment. During youth, the material desire to enjoy the material senses is certainly present. And unless one fully satisfies these lusty desires in youth, there is a chance of one's being disturbed in rendering service to the Lord. We have actually seen that many sannyasis who accept sannyas prematurely, not having satisfied their material desires, fall down because they are disturbed. Therefore, the general process is to go through grihastha life and vanaprastha life and finally come to sannyas and devote oneself completely to the service of the Lord. Maharaj Yadu was ready to accept his father's order and exchange youth for old age because he was confident that the youth taken by his father would be returned. But because this exchange would delay his complete engagement in devotional service, he did not want to accept his father's old age, for he was eager to achieve freedom from disturbances. Moreover, among the descendants of Yadu would be Lord Krishna. Therefore, because Yadu was eager to see the Lord's appearance in his dynasty as soon as possible, Yadu refused to accept his father's proposal. This was not irreligious, however, because Yadu's purpose was to serve the Lord. Because Yadu was a faithful servant of the Lord, Lord Krishna appeared in his dynasty. As confirmed in the prayers of Kunti, Yado Priyasya Vanvayaye. Yadu was very dear to Krishna, who was therefore eager to descend in Yadu's dynasty. In conclusion, Maharaj Yadu should not be considered a dharmagya, ignorant of religious principles, as the next verse designates his brothers. He was like the four Sanakas, Chatusana, who refused the order of their father, Brahma, for the sake of a better cause. Because the 4 Kumaras wanted to engage themselves completely in the service of the Lord as brahmacharis, their refusal to obey their father's order was not irreligious. Jai Prabhupada. Well, this purport, this instance, it's a little complex. I'm going to restate the context of this particular verse, and then we'll look at some points Prabhupada has made in his purport, and then I'll share some takeaways based on what I have heard from elevated souls. So, context. Yayati was still a young man enjoying life with his wife Devayani and also with Sharmista. When Devayani found out about this intimate relationship with Sharmista, she was very angry. She went to her father, and her father's response was to curse Yayati with old age. And Yayati protested to his father-in-law, saying, because he was essentially saying, by cursing me, you're cursing your daughter as well. She's young, and now she's going to have to live with an old husband. So Devayani's father allowed Yayati to exchange his old age with the youth of one of his sons for a temporary period of time. So Yayati then he went to his sons that he had with Devayani, and he asked them to exchange their youth, and they refused, all of them. Their refusal, Prabhupada explains, was irreligious. Their reasoning was they simply didn't want to be old, and they had the typical mood of rebellious youth, of, no, we're not doing that. I don't want to. You can't make me. We're going to do what we want. Then Yayati approached his sons with Sharmista, and Yadu, as we hear, also refused, but for a very different reason. What he was saying essentially was, I'm not refusing your instruction out of disrespect for you, and not out of a desire for sense enjoyment. I have to prepare myself for my service. And accepting old age now would derail that preparation. So Prabhupada explains that his refusal was actually religious. And then Prabhupada explains that Yadu was looking ahead to his dynasty. Lord Krishna was destined to appear in the Yadu line, and Yadu didn't want anything to delay that divine plan. If he had accepted Yayati's old age, it would postpone his own entrance into Grihastha life, it would postpone the birth of future generations, and thus it would postpone Lord Krishna's appearance. Because his refusal was entirely centered on Krishna's mission, though externally his refusal looked similar to his brother's, his refusal was actually spiritually perfect. And Prabhupada compares Yadu's reasoning to that of the 4 Kumaras. Yadu said to his father, I need to enter Grihastha ashram now. I need to marry, I need to prepare myself. The Kumaras, when their father, Lord Brahma, told them, right, to get married, their answer was, no way. And that was because being brahmacharis was best for their spiritual life. So Yadu recognized getting married right now was best for his devotional service. The 4 Kumaras refused their father's instruction because they realized becoming brahmacharis was best for their devotional service. So one of the takeaways of this pastime is that dharmic choices are not one size fits all. What was best for the devotional service of the 4 Kumaras was not what was best for Yadu. And what is best for spiritual life, I have heard from the elevated souls of our movement, what is best for spiritual life, on the one hand, can be spoken of in an absolute sense. But it also has a personal dimension. Another interesting point that Srila Prabhupada makes in the purport, he says that generally people only give up material enjoyment after they have tasted it. And this made me think of George Harrison. George Harrison was, of course, many of us know, he was one of the Beatles, and he became unimaginably famous at just 20 years old. He experienced, as one of the Beatles, fame, wealth, beauty, adoration, power on a scale that had not yet been seen in the 20th century. He said later in life something really interesting. He said, "I'm really glad that happened to me when I was so young, because it made me realize this isn't it." He had the highest, deepest level of material opulence and material sense enjoyment at 20 years old. At 27, the Beatles broke up. And by 27, he was thinking there's got to be more to life than this. So that early exposure of this intense material pleasure gave him detachment pretty early on in his life compared to most of us. But, and this is important, that is his story. It's not necessarily universal, because many people taste enjoyment and simply want more, not less. After all, there is another purport in the 6th canto where Srila Prabhupada writes that one can go through all kinds of material experience and still never become renounced. For example, Grihamedis, they raise families, they grow old, they collect experiences, and yet we see they don't become attached. There's something called a midlife crisis, where once somebody gets into their 50s, all of a sudden they want to start over, get a new spouse, get a bigger house, move to the tropical islands. So experience alone doesn't cause vairagya. The mercy of the Lord and his devotees is the cause of renunciation. But in today's purport, Prabhupada makes the point that generally one needs to go through material life in order to let go of it. And thus, in the Varnashram system, there is that regulated process of renunciation where you give up a little bit and a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more until finally there is sannyas where one has given up everything. So what does all of this mean? It means that what is best for one's spiritual life, one's devotional service, really depends on the person, their nature, and their stage of life right now. And this is why it's having good authorities, having a shiksha guru, having, of course, an initiating spiritual master with genuine affection for us is essential to our growth. Having someone, a senior in our lives, who doesn't just quote the rules, but who really knows our nature, our conditioning, and our heart. Only having a relationship with someone like that can guide us into the next step in Krishna consciousness. So Vaishnava association is so, so important. I listened to a class by Her Grace Urmila Devi Prabhu, and she shared that from her perspective, she said from her own life that having been in Grihastha ashram, I think she said it was something like 23 years before she entered the renounced order, she felt that having that long time in Grihastha ashram later made renunciation easier for her. She felt that, she said, when the mind may look at something and think, oh, maybe I should enjoy a little, maybe I should try that, she can say, you already did that. Remember? We've been there, done that. Time to move on. And the mind becomes quiet. She says, I've smelled the roses and I've felt the thorns. I have the experience to know that, enjoyment doesn't lie in those things. It's in the past. But she also emphasized that experience alone doesn't transform us. It's understanding our experience through sadhana, service, sangha, guru, that is what turns that experience into renunciation. There are different paths for different souls, as we see with Yadu and the 4 Kumaras. And some people find marriage very stabilizing and purifying. For some people, it's a distraction. Some people take sannyas. Some people never take sannyas. And just as the nectar of instruction glorifies living at Radhakund as the peak of devotional service, but not everyone is meant to immediately move there. So in the same way, these absolute truths must be applied personally so that we can progress. But whatever path one follows, brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, sannyas, if it's not rooted in Krishna consciousness, it is useless. And whatever path is rooted in loving service becomes perfect. Srila Prabhupada once wrote a letter to Shyam Sundar Prabhu in 1970, April of 1970, and he was speaking about George Harrison in that letter. He wrote, "I think George does not require to become my formal disciple because he is already more than my disciple. He has sympathy for my movement, and I have all blessings for him." I found that interesting because Prabhupada is revealing that George's unique form of service through music, influence, wealth, his platform, was fully accepted by him as devotional service, despite the fact that at that time in our movement, to be seen as a disciple or as a devotee meant to, shave your head and take on saffron and move into the ashram. But Prabhupada saw it as equal. And so we cannot line up devotees and compare as if their ashram automatically reveals advancement. Krishna and the acharyas see surrender. Krishna sees intention, not categories. At the same time, the more we read Prabhupada's books and hear from him, he does emphasize that the vast majority of us do need formal initiation and a clear ashram, because we need vows and guidance and structure so that our service doesn't drift into sentimentality. The Vedic system, however, accommodates variety because souls have variety. And that's such a beautiful thing. Yadu and his brothers looked like they were doing the same thing. They were refusing their father. But the brothers were acting irreligiously, and Yadu was acting religiously. They were externally identical, but internally completely different because of their motivations. And for the same reason, we have to be cautious about judging others and thinking that, one level is higher than the other. Because someone who looks properly situated may not be, and someone who looks out of order may be perfectly situated for their spiritual life. And we hear in this purport and over that what is the ultimate dharma? The ultimate dharma is to facilitate Krishna. Sarva dharman pricheja, mamekam sharanam vraja. All secondary dharmas exist to serve this one dharma of surrender. If we follow external dharmas but don't come to love of God, we have wasted our time. And if we come to love of God, all other dharmas become harmonized automatically. Once we choose devotional service, Krishna arranges everything, even if externally it looks messy or out of order. So the real question that we have to ask ourselves is, what is best for my Krishna consciousness right now, honestly? Where is the best place that I can serve? As His Holiness Radhanath Swami says, to be truthful with others is honesty. To be truthful with ourselves is integrity. It's better to enter Grihastha ashram sincerely than pretend to be on a different platform and then fall down. It's better to take shelter where I can function and grow rather than imitate someone else's path and then become discouraged. As the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu says, when one is not attached to anything but accepts everything in relation to Krishna, one is rightly situated above possessiveness. His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj explains that real renunciation means doing what Krishna wants, not what looks renounced. Srila Prabhupada gave a simple example. He said if one is living in a palace and Krishna wants you to live under a tree, real renunciation is leaving the palace and living under the tree. And if you are living under a tree and Krishna wants you to serve in a palace, real renunciation is moving into the palace. Renunciation is not about what something looks like. It's only about how best we can serve Krishna. And Bhakti measures things only through that lens. His Holiness Kadamakanana Swami Maharaj explained that Bhakti Yoga, he even said sannyas yoga, is not about denying ourselves or forcibly cutting ties or being harsh, because true giving up of something is never artificial. And he said something really beautiful. He said that Bhishma Dev explains that a great devotee renounces not by suppression, but because the heart gradually becomes so full of Krishna that there is no room left for anything else. As Krishna fills the heart, everything else and every other relationship naturally becomes secondary. On a morning walk in Mayapur, Srila Prabhupada said, who had the most tapasya? And he listed many of Mahaprabhu's associates. So who did the most tapasya? He said Advaita Acharya was married with children, Nityananda Prabhu married with children, Srivas Thakur married, and then there was Swarup Damodar, Rupa Goswami, Sanatan Goswami, renunciates. Who did the most tapasya? And then Prabhupada said that their renunciation was the same, because renunciation is not in externals. Their renunciation, all of them, was in their pure surrender to Lord Chaitanya. And that's the template. Vaishnav character is the actual foundation of tapasya. What wonderful, there's so many glories of bhakti. And bhakti is so powerful that even a grihasta can be fully renounced, fully Krishna conscious. Srila Prabhupada notes in the purport of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, the combined verses of 13-14, that in Jnana Yoga and Ashtanga Yoga, complete lifelong celibacy is required in order to make advancement. But in bhakti, even a married person can attain perfection. He writes, one who, however, follows the rules and regulations of married life, having a sexual relationship only with his wife, and that also under regulation, is also called a brahmachari. And then I'd like to share some really nice points that Srila Prabhupada makes in the story of Gajendra in this incredible purport. It's from the 8th canto, chapter 2, verse 30. So in that purport, Prabhupada explains, Gajendra, think of it this way. If you were to see an elephant and a crocodile, and you knew they were going to go to battle with each other, who would you assume would win? The elephant. Why? Much more bigger, powerful, stronger. I think we even hear how much intelligence elephants have. Yet, Gajendra lost to the crocodile. Gajendra could not win in this battle, Prabhupada explains, because they were fighting in the water. And the water was the crocodile's element. The crocodile gained strength, and Gajendra lost it. Prabhupada said that this teaches that we must place ourselves in the ashram, an environment where our bhakti can thrive. And that condition will not be identical for everyone. Prabhupada says in that purport, if someone is sexually agitated, let them enter the Grihastha ashram. There's no shame in that. Do not stop fighting Maya. Take shelter in a way that you can realistically maintain and continue serving Krishna and his devotees. He quotes Mahaprabhu saying, Stane stitaha shruti gatam tanuvan manobhi. Remain in the ashram suitable for you and hear about Krishna. Prabhupada writes, it is not essential to take sannyas. If one is not ready, one can enter Grihastha ashram and fight Maya with great strength, but do not give up the fight. And this is what Yadu was doing when he entered Grihastha ashram. His refusal was not about comfort. It was about serving Krishna without disturbance. He wasn't avoiding duty or responsibility. He was protecting his bhakti. So we can see that real renunciation is not about external ashram. Real renunciation is surrendering to what Krishna wants from me. And just as we can say, well, some people should be soldiers and some people should never be soldiers. They don't have the right character. They don't have the right disposition. Similarly, some people should take sannyas. Some people should never take sannyas. Some people should take sannyas, but not now. They should go through other ashrams first. Some people should become grihastas. For some, that is a distraction to their devotional service. And some need to experience material life, and some need to avoid it completely. But whatever one does, it must be offered to Krishna, or it's useless. And whatever one does for Krishna, whether it's in a palace or under a tree, it's perfect. It becomes perfect. We hear that renunciation is not austerity for its own sake. Its essence is love, and its form is whatever allows that love for Krishna to grow without obstruction. And that is the heart of this verse. Those are my thoughts. I'd love to hear your comments, corrections, questions. Sorry, my contact lens slipped. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. Thank you for nice class. You covered several aspects of it. I agree with everything you said, but I need your help to figure out something which something which is bothering. When I read this purport, these lines which says, during youth, the material desire to enjoy the material senses is certainly present, and unless one fully satisfies these lusty desires in youth, there's a chance of one being disturbed in rendering service to the Lord. So maybe there are more references like this in Bhagavatam, but I don't know. This is the first time I'm seeing in Prabhupada purport this sentence. And I mean, Prabhupada makes several other statements to justify Yadu's decision, but just this sentence, something is bothering in my mind to other things I've heard. For example, Prabhupada says like, the mind comes up with so many ways to enjoy, so we should give it higher taste and not give the lower taste, right? We might have heard this several times. There's one more thing I have heard Bhakti Rasamrita Maharaj says, that we should be very careful what we expose our mind to, because whatever we expose our mind is always registered in our subconscious mind. And after a few years, when you progress in bhakti, probably you don't have taste for those lower things, but it comes to bother you again because it's registered in your subconscious mind, and at that point you might have exposed something. And I also agree with George Harrison and Urmila Mataji's example you gave. You know, they experience this and now they know that doesn't give happiness. But still, somewhere in my mind, I feel there is an apparent contradiction. So how do we understand when Prabhupada makes this statement? I hope I put my question clearly.
Yeah. Do you have anything, Gokulanda? It is, I know when we first read that, I think we're all like, what? This is the first time I'm hearing this. We're always told to, avoid.
Because I'm feeling like if you give in, sometimes also tricky, especially for a sadhaka like me. I mean, Yadu Maharaj was much higher platform. He knew clearly what dharma is, what she shouldn't be doing. But somebody like practicing dharma, like my mind may ask for so many things. So then looking at this sentence, I might think, oh, Prabhupada said in the purport, you need to satisfy this so that you can grow spiritually. Then your mind won't hang. Kind of here it says, otherwise later in life you also, I think further we'd also see like, some people, they took sannyas but they went back because they haven't really satisfied all those desires. But mind comes up with so many desires all the time. So I can just think of this line and say, so okay, maybe I should satisfy this desire for me to progress. You know, it kind of, so how?
So that's an excellent question. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm reminded of, I don't remember exactly where, but in somewhere in 7th canto, Narad Muni talks about this. I think in the conversation with Yudhishthir Maharaj, he speaks about how he's talking about two classes. First class is of the materialistic people who tend to, enjoy or indulge into heavy sense gratification. And that's how actually they're exhausted of their tendency, inclination to enjoy. And we see some pseudo gurus teaching that philosophy, Sambhoksa Samadhi, Osho and all. So for some people, it works, but it is like kleshaha adhikaraste shamavvyakta saptachit. It is an indirect process. And then he says the same thing which can be achieved. I think the example that Prabhupada gives in this context in one of the lectures is of the putting too much of fuel like ghee in the fire. Sometimes we see performing fire sacrifices and too much of ghee is put, so the fire is put off. Okay, so sometimes it may work, but not necessarily all the time. So then Narad Muni goes on to say the same result after going through so much, may or may not be achieved. Most of the time it will not be, because as we all know, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, more fuel you put into the fire, dushpurena nalenacha. So the fire is going to get ablaze more and more. It's going to become fierce. So both aspects are there. We have seen practically, you put too much of ghee in the fire, but if the fire is very small, one time my senior god brother Radha Gopinath Prabhu, he said, if the fire is too small, yes, it will be put off. But is our fire that small? That lust, is such a huge fire. So no amount of fuel is going to put it off. So that is one aspect. And the other aspect, Narad Muni says, the same result can be quickly achieved by practicing devotional service without having to, put conscious effort. Of course, we do. But the power of devotional service is such that, in and of itself, it will take care of the lust. So we have to understand, I think in one of the purports, Prabhupada says, he gives the example of, if we are hungry, we eat it, and the hunger is satisfied temporarily. And if we are angry, then anger can be satisfied by getting angry, just let it out, right? But the greed can never be satisfied. So the lust, when not satisfied, gives to the birth of wrath. And when it is satisfied, it gives birth to greed. So we want more and more. So that greed can never be satisfied. That is my understanding. So Ekadashi, for example, someone may be able to fast without water easily, right? But for someone it may not be possible. So that's why it is recommended, at least eat something, no grain. And Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur went to such an extent that if you're sleeping whole day, just go eat rice and preach. So that is why there is nothing black or white, I always say in our scriptures. It is as per time, place, situation, and the person. The background, the baggage that is coming from their, past lives. So all the aspects are there, they have their place, but you cannot fit that piece into, you cannot fill the gap somewhere else. That is my understanding.
Oh, Tulsi Saki. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Manjari Gopika.
Krishna.
Thank you for nice class, and thank you for this wonderful discussion. And just like during the class also, and as she brought the same topics were coming to my mind, what is the difference between those who are regular people trying to enjoy, and what is the difference between us also trying to enjoy. I think that difference comes in the fact, like you mentioned, of us taking shelter of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So the difference comes is that we know that we're not supposed to, because we are regularly listening, but that tendency, that desire is there. But the moment we burn ourselves a little bit, then we go back to our, okay, this is what the scripture said, this is what Guru Sadhu said, so let us try and not do it again. Whereas those who don't have that knowledge, don't have that shelter of Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, they think that is the only thing. So if they are not able to enjoy properly, they say, okay, let me just try it just a little different. Maybe this time I will enjoy. So I think that's
Right.
one big difference, what I see between us trying to enjoy after having taken shelter of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, and those who don't have that knowledge and those who don't have that shelter. And my takeaway from Gokulananda Prabhu's point was also that we should know ourselves, how much is required. You were giving example of Bhakti Rasamrita Maharaj. His Holiness Radhanath Swami was talking about Bhakti Rasamrita Maharaj. He's so gentle that even his biggest fight with his mother is like, Mom, please don't do this. So it depends on the mode the person is in. And, so we have to know ourselves. We have to know, what level can we accept, what is, too much for us. So he said that same point also. And I had just one clarification. Devyani and Sarmishta,
Yeah.
Yadu is Devyani's son, and Sarmishta is Puru's, mom. And the reason why I want to clarify that is because in my mind, I wanted to paint a person who's bad and a person who's good between Sharmishta and Devyani, and it's actually not that way. They both had their, arguments and problems. They both did things that were not good, but they both had great sons. Devyani's son was Yadu, and Sharmishta's son was Puru. And the Purus, I was just reading up, the Kurus come from Purus. Bharat and Kuru come from Sharmishta's lineage, and Krishna comes from Devyani's lineage. So can't paint either of them good or bad, and so that's why I wanted to just
Thank you
clarify.
so much for clarifying that. These Any other thoughts? I was thinking of the purport from Bhagavad Gita 2.59, where Prabhupada explains that, just thinking about sense enjoyment and stuff, that the restrictions for us are there because he says they're only good until one actually has a taste for Krishna consciousness. When one is actually Krishna conscious, one automatically loses taste for these other things. And although, as you were stating, there's a difference between devotees who are trying to regulate their senses but still have sense desires and people who have never regulated their senses and are just pursuing those recklessly, I could definitely see in my life, I definitely still have sense desires, but I feel like I can't enjoy some things for as long, Like when I was new to Krishna consciousness, this is kind of embarrassing, but I would go to Bhagavad Gita class and it was amazing, but it was really intense for me. It was intense for my brain. It was like intense for my nervous system. And after that, I just sometimes I just wanted a little Maya. Like I just wanted to go hang out with my non-devotee friends and talk about their nonsense, their dates and their bosses and whatever. And now when I talk to non-devotees, I am so bored. I'm so bored after just a few minutes of I'm like, I can't believe we're talking about nothing. None of this means anything. I don't want to, I want to go back to being with devotees and hearing about their service and this Maharaj and this bhajan and all of that. So anyway, we can see the longer we spend in Krishna consciousness, the those sense desires, they do fade and stuff. I mean, because the false ego is so strong, though, we find ourselves pulled to trying to enjoy. Hopefully it'll go away completely at some point in this lifetime. I was just thinking about that. I hope some of that made sense. We still have material desires, but they're lessening and they're different.
As Mother Tulsi Saki was talking about Kuru dynasty and Yadu dynasty, like I think a couple of days ago we had a discussion why this mundane topic, as the Bhagavatam is progressing towards the 10th canto, why is it there in the 9th canto? You know, it's just like any two people fighting and, two ladies fighting. And why is it there in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam? Now we see why. Those souls are not ordinary souls. Those mothers led to such great dynasties, like Yadu dynasty and Kuru dynasty. That is the answer. So I beg my forgiveness from those two mothers. And what's the other point I wanted to say? Yeah. Regulated, we say 4 regulative principles, right? So regulated sense enjoyment, right? So in Grasthashram that is allowed, and Prabhupada gave certain standards, right? It has to be regulated, like periodical and this and that. More details can be found in, Prabhupada's lectures, and also in Sanatana Goswami has given those details. So there is a purpose why it is given. So when there is a purpose, we need to understand there are people who are addressed, who are specifically addressed by such tenets, and we have seen, like Prabhupada also talks about so many sannyasis, brahmacharis, they fell down. So it's like example is to give was Grasthashram is like sitting safely in the bullock cart, whereas the renunciates, they are on the airplane. The progress is very fast, but then if the accident happens, that is also.
I just wanted to talk about just Gokul and Prabhu brought up this question. This question again, like few classes ago, he asked why we are discussing this topic. I think once Prabhu asked that question, I was actually contemplating on that. And even when Antrayami Mataji gave the class, which this episode took place between Sharmishta and Devyani, she was asking, what do we learn? So I was kind of contemplating on that, and I'm grateful to Prabhu for asking that question and putting things into context. So when I was thinking about it, I was thinking probably because this is presented at this point, because you can see Sharmishta and Devyani, they were so very close friends. They are from great lineage, but still there was how powerful Maya can be, and also like how their fathers reacted to those their situations, and how like Yayati, even though he's in such great lineage, and that he had to exchange his old age to youth, and how powerful desires, lusty desires, can drag somebody down to that he goes and asks his son. So I think it was kind of a warning, and also Krishna is preparing us, like, this is how degrading this material world can be, material desires can be, and how much our mind can trick us for even small situations like what Devyani and Sarmishta, and then it blew up into such large proportion. So I think Krishna is trying to prep our mind that to enjoy his pastimes, we need to be aware of all these dangers in life, so we can absorb more into Krishna consciousness. So I'm grateful to Gokul and Prabhu for bringing up this question.
That's a really good point.
And also I think another thing I was thinking about is that's why all the time the acharyas, like, they always pray, right? I don't need dhanam, I don't need janam, like all these things they constantly pray, because I feel like this, because Sharmishta was chastising, because she felt like she's, from very high birth.
Right.
Like we can see like how high birth, success, money, fame, all those things, it's like a very dangerous slippery slope. It can just get into our head anytime and drag us down in our bhakti. So I think as we are getting close to Krishna's pastimes, Krishna is teaching us much dangerous and hard lessons for us to be aware of, like, if you hanker for any of these, and then our bhakti can slip down anytime. So thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah.
Last quick dumb question. Maybe Jaishnav can answer. I was thinking, why Yayati couldn't ask one of his subjects? He was a king. Why did he ask his sons? He could have, I think very poor people, one of his subjects, citizens, could have very well, agreed to his proposal to exchange his.
But isn't it because Shukacharya told him to ask the sons? He was following.
Oh, specifically he said that?
Yeah.
Okay. Just, that was the condition, that he could exchange it only with his son.
That's what he said.
You were mentioning about how dealing with non-devotee friends is a challenge. You were also alluding to work, right? Colleagues and so on.
Oh yeah,
So
yes, please.
I had a question, like, most of us, I'm asking this question from my standpoint, like we are in the same situation. We have a job, we have to deal with people who are not devotees. So rather than take their association, I just wanted to throw it out, like, if anyone have any tips on how we can give our association to them.
Radhanath Swami says that when a devotee is interacting with materialistic people, you don't take their association, you give your association. But I will clarify that I've always had a job, I've always worked in the world, and it's good and it's fine. I was just talking about how I used to pursue enjoyment in like mundane topics with non-devotees, and now it's just, if I have to, I don't want to have deep conversations with anyone who's not a devotee, because it's just so incredibly unfulfilling, if that makes any sense. But how to give your association to others. I don't know. I don't speak about Krishna consciousness well, I do actually a little bit at work. But it's always in the context of when other people are interested. I was told pretty early on when I became a devotee that my service, because I asked the question, I was like, I don't get it. I'm reading Bhagavad Gita. It's all about devotional service, serve Krishna. I'm filing papers. I'm, working at these different businesses. How am I supposed to dedicate this to Krishna? This makes no sense. And one thing I was told by Maharaj was, your service is to present a good example of what a devotee is. And I have found that to be a good guiding point in my interactions with my coworkers, and I have found that I'm very much appreciated because I'm always thinking of that, of representing a devotee in that way. So does anybody, Kusisaki, you've worked in the world a long time. Do you have any tips on this?
The question again was, Prabhu, how to
give your association when you're working with non-devotees.
What I was asking is, we are a preaching movement, right? So we want to actually give Krishna consciousness to people. Anyone we meet, that's the instruction of Lord Chaitanya as well. And most of us have jobs, most of us are working. So how can we present it to them? Because in my experience, to be honest, people in this noble country of the US, they're not interested in philosophy. So any practical tips is what I was asking.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Like Manjari Gopika said, if we preach directly, I feel I'll get fired right away. And that I don't think Krishna wants us to do that. And I honestly, in my career, I have tried to not work, tried to ditch my job, and somehow by Krishna's arrangement, I'm back in that same position. So I understand now, and also not to accept, oh, this is my karma. No, this is what Krishna wants, and how can I do this so that Krishna is satisfied? And I think there is great power, like she said, in devotees being in the world outside. It is very powerful. Just, this Thursday, one of my colleagues was like, who would not have a turkey for Thanksgiving? She was like, who would just not have a turkey? I was like, we're doing tofurkey, curd bird. So that conversation, just for them to just even think that there is an alternate, is if we don't go there, then how will they know? We don't, just by being present there, it is tremendous. I've changed jobs maybe 5-6 times. Every time, this last one, either when I have these like really powerful conversations with a colleague or I exchange books, either I leave the job or they leave the job. And this time, I gave the Srimad Bhagavatam to my manager, and he moved on to a different organization. So it's like, that these interactions, they wouldn't have unless you were there. So, I'm like, I don't want to work. I want to be here. I want to be making vases. I want to be chanting. But then Krishna is like, no, you have to meet a certain person. You have to give prasadam to a certain person, even unwillingly. But I feel it's tremendous. It's very powerful.
Yeah. I feel like even if people have just heard, we have as much time as you all want. This is your Bhagavatam class.
Should I?
Yes, prasadam's out, I guess. You're into that.
So to Prabhuji's question, just add couple of points. What we have experienced at work is, it actually depends on what kind of job situation you are in. But at the same time, in this country, the great thing is that, there is, if you go through proper channels within the organization, for example, I'll give you a few examples to make it more relevant. Most of the companies have ERGs, which is called employee resource groups. And the ERGs allows you to create a platform, whether it is Christianity discussion, atheistic discussion, or any other religious discussion. You could formally approach HR that I want to create a platform under ERG to cater. It could be Sanatan Dharma, it could be Bhagavad Gita, or it could be mental health. How do I address mental health through our spiritual upliftment, or it could be yoga, it could be mantra meditation. And if the company policy allows, you can do that. So for example, in our company, we have these platforms. So we actually have Rediscover Yourself from the lens of Bhagavad Gita. So that course is going on, that 400 to 500 people join. Then we have a mantra meditation club where people join through online as well as in person. So they come, we sit, we talk about meditation, then we do mantra meditation. If they're interested, they're welcome. Not, they can go. So that is one way, but not every company may have the same thing. Other thing what I think has worked is, yes, we do not want to take the association of the people from the material perspective, but how do we give it? I think we have to go back, some of us, at least for me, somebody gave me association. Somebody helped me pull through. And we can learn from them that there is just enough. And then, you give it association, spend time and move on. Don't spend more than that. That balance we have to learn. Otherwise, we can't really preach. Somebody did it for us also. So I think same principle has to be applied. And the third one, who said, Mataji was saying earlier, that we have to present ourselves in the best way. Are we actually happy? Right? Are we actually following? And are we afraid of putting, simple example, Vaishnav Tilak. how can we get to a platform that I can go to office with my Vaishnav tilak and feel nothing about it? I feel good about it. People will ask, what is that? There's an opportunity to explain. Like in our case, we, when I sit online and if I have tilak, people actually ask me, oh, what is that? And then I get an opportunity to explain. So we have to come to a platform that it is absolutely okay to be able to do it in a way that HR does not fire you. We are not forcing anybody.
Mhm.
We are explaining what we are doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll just, I know we have to go. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think you just have to find your in the way that you talk to people. One thing that works really well for me, that I'm in a Western body, but I'm married to an Indian man, and that's always really fascinating for people to hear about. Like, where did you meet? Oh, we met in India. What were you doing in India? Well, let me tell you, I was with a yoga group, and he was there because he was teaching Bhagavad Gita. Oh, what's Bhagavad Gita? Bhagavad Gita is this yoga philosophy. So then a little bit over time, they want to hear more and more. Oh, like, what are you doing this weekend? Oh, there's a festival, you see. We have festivals a lot. So just like over time, I can drop the word Krishna. I can say it's a festival, and it kind of makes it sound like I'm just embracing my husband's culture, when really, it's much deeper than that. I did have one coworker that sat behind me. Her last name was Devaraj. And so over time, and she was Indian, obviously. So over time, oh, where are you from? Oh, my husband's from Mumbai. Have you been to India? Yes, I love India. So over time, and then one day I was like, Devaraj, isn't that Lord Indra? And she was like, how do you know that? And I was like, oh, I love, hearing from scripture and stuff. He's so interesting. Anyway, I waited a long time, and then one year I was just like, this is it. It was Gita Jayanti, and I gave her a Bhagavad Gita, and she was so ecstatic. And she started asking me things like, hey, how can this is really, how did you learn Bhagavad Gita so well? I was like, well, you got to take a class. So it just, I guess, playing the long game and dropping little things over time. And like I said, using whatever perception of you there is as you're in, like my last name, but I'm a white lady. So how did you get that name type thing? Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.